Look at how cute this little guy is. Oh my goodness. This is going to be awesome. So, just for your reference, this is the Gigabyte 4060 low profile. I've actually got, here's a 4060. Now, this is a Ti, but still, this is the MSI Gaming 4060 Ti and Gigabyte low profile. Look, look at that little guy. Small form factor has never been so fun. This thing's so freaking cute. Today we're going to be jumping into the world of small form factor gaming PCs, and I'm going to highlight one of my favorite most recent builds I've done in the Jonsbo NV-10, which is a 4.5 liter case. Let's take a look at what we built with. At the start of the year, Jonesbo put out a new case, the NV-10, and they have two versions. One is built to be more like a miniature NAS, and one is actually built to accept a video card. It's a 4.5 liter case, and it absolutely got me excited. So in the world of small form factor, a lot of people make ITX builds, mini ITX builds, but very few people start getting into that very small, non-standard PSUs, sub 5 liter type situation. And a large part of that is because in the past, there hasn't really been a lot of great video card options. The small form factor products had really grown stale. Like the Radeon 6400 XT was really your best bet, and that thing was barely better than an APU. So when I saw this case come out and simultaneously NVIDIA launched their 4060 low profile, or I should say Gigabyte launched their 4060 low profile, I knew this was going to be a match made in heaven and decided to put this thing together. So I'm going to go through the full stat sheet of what I did, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the harder things that occurred while I was trying to build it and some of the things you might face. I will say small form factor is probably not the best as a first-time computer builder, and that's going to be for a variety of reasons. You're just going to run into less space to build in. You got to be more selective with your parts. Not everything's necessarily just going to screw right in. You might have to do some modifications. And then also, if this is your first computer, you want the best performance to dollar, which small form factor is never going to give you. But in my case, I wanted something that I could put discreetly next to my PC my TV, and run Steam games on that would hopefully at least be able to, run anything a little bit older, but ideally be able to run, some of my newer games as well. So anything that's small form factor, sometimes the cost can get out of control. I try to keep the cost as low as possible because at the end of the day, I went with the 4060 low profile. You're only going to get 4060 performance out of this computer, which is great performance for its size, but you don't want to accidentally spend in, $2,000 on this type of build. So let's take a look at it. First of all, I went with the Ryzen 5 9600X. This is my favorite entry-level processor. I think AMD is killing it. I just could not recommend going with a Core Ultra 245K or anything like this point in time because you need the Z motherboard. The prices are too high, and it's just not going to work out very well for you. And I'm not too worried about in crazy processor power here because ultimately I'm going to hook this up to my 4K TV and it's a 4060. I'm not going to be rocking, worrying about 500 FPS or anything like that. So this was kind of a no-brainer. 9600X, one of my favorite processors. I think it's great for a $200 CPU. It probably meets the needs of a lot of people. But you got to somehow keep this thing cool. So this was the first thing that I had to deal with, and I've had to deal with this on a lot of small form factor builds, is I went with the Thermalright AXP90 X36. So on the NV10, the max cooler height is 38 millimeters, and what this means to kind of decode this, AXP90, it's a 90 millimeter width fan, and X36, it's a 36 millimeter high fan. So I knew that this would fit great in the case, but I want to go over a couple of things that I've ran into quite often. So when you get into these very low profile coolers, they do a couple tricks, I think, to get maybe, I don't know, just every little millimeter out of it. And the first one is you're going to remove your CPU latch. So the way that this thing mounts, it doesn't use like the traditional mounting method. It's going to just go direct onto the CPU, and it itself is going to hold the CPU into position. So if you're not comfortable or you're not familiar with, basically you're going to need, like, I don't know, I think it's like a T20 or something. It's like a star type bit. And you remove, this is, you know, your traditional latch that's holding your CPU in place. Here you go. You take that thing off, and then the cooler is going to hold it down itself. And I'm sure that somehow saves like a millimeter or something. The other part that's more frustrating, I'm fine with that, but there's probably not a good picture here, but you can see these screws. Now these are going to go straight through the back of the motherboard, and then you're basically going to spin a nut on them. Well, they make them extra long, and that's great to get the nuts started. And then the nuts are like super low profile, but it's not great for mounting it in the case, because your case, you're making a small form factor build, probably has limited back spacing. The NV10 does have a bunch of like holes and everything in the motherboard tray, but none of them lined up. So I've had to do this in two different computers, and this might be something some people are also not comfortable with. I basically taped off the back of the motherboard and then took a Dremel once this was installed and completely removed the backing of these screws. Now, before I did that, I booted the computer up and made sure everything worked great, because I was basically considering this a one-time install. This is like a one and done. In 3 years, if I need to, replace the thermal paste, that's a future me problem, because I could definitely take this off, but with how short the screws are now, I doubt I would ever get it seated again. So why would I do this? Well, A, because Thermalright makes my favorite cheap fan. It's 21 bucks. If 3 years down the road I gotta buy another one, if I even still have this computer, I guess so be it. And I'm sure I could spend forever on the internet trying to research this thing, but lots of times on these lesser known fans, there's not a whole lot of information on them. So I can't tell you. Maybe if you spent like 50 bucks on a Noctua or whatever, maybe it would have a better mounting system. But with a little bit of tape and a Dremel, I was able to make it work just fine. But that's kind of my first, like, hey, these small form factor things don't always go together as easy as you might think. But we got that taken care of. Cooler was just the first step. It was easy day. Dremeled it off. It's stuck on there for life. And the most important thing is, don't start modifying anything until you test that all the components work. So I did a pre-run installed outside of the case, hooked up the power supply, made sure it booted, made sure everything worked great. And then I was like, all right, now I am ready to commit. And I installed, I basically shortened the screws on the cooler and then installed it to the case for its final fitment. The next thing up is the motherboard. So this is just a placeholder. I did not use the ASRock B850 Lightning. This is a $210 motherboard. I spend a lot of money on motherboards, but in this particular build, I knew that I would not be trying to do a massive overclock or trying to, get the every last inch of performance out of that 9600X, because A, I knew I was going to be thermal limited, because I am not going to have a bunch of case fans, not a whole ton of cooling. And then also I knew I was hooking it up to my 4K TV, so I don't need to squeeze out everything out of the CPU. It'll be fine. So I put this in as a placeholder because what I used, you are not going to find on PC Part Picker. I paid 85 bucks for it, and it is the Jinyu B650i Night Devil. Yeah, Night Devil. There we go. Okay, so hear me out. I was very skeptical when I first purchased this, and I've now done 2 builds on them, and there's some pros and some cons. So the pro is it's a sub $100 mini ITX B650 that will support 9,000 CPUs. I did double check. You can go onto their first official website. Google will translate it, or they updated it. You know, when I first did this, I had to manually have Google translate it. It looks like now they have an English and a Chinese page. But they do have BIOS updates. So if you come in here, download, you'll see that this will update it for the 9000 series, and you'll be good to go. But this motherboard, for all intents and purposes, has worked great for me. It's got, you know, a cooler, VRM cooler. It's even got some nice stuff like a cover and cooler on the M2 drive. It's got the metal reinforced PCIe. This thing's got a lot of premium features for how cheap it is. And when you get into the BIOS, it's more basic than what you would see, like obviously on your MSI or Gigabyte or Asus BIOS. But all the options are still there. You can still do PBO. You can still do RAM tuning. You can still do all of these things. And right now I'm 2 for 2, knock on wood, but they've both worked absolutely great for me, and they're extremely cheap. Now, I have not found this motherboard for sale anywhere other than AliExpress. I'll try to get a link in there for you guys. Anytime I shop on here, I just make sure, like, you know, the seller's got a lot of sales, good reviews, that sort of thing. Because sometimes if something's too cheap to be true, it's a scam. But I've ordered 2 of these. Both of them were sub $100, free shipping. You know, when you do order from AliExpress, it'll probably take like 2 weeks to get to you. But with a little bit of patience, this will save you about $100. The other thing to note here on this motherboard is when you look at some of the pictures, it looks like it has Wi-Fi. Do not fall for this mistake. And this is where you might just say, you know what, screw it. It's worth me spending the $200. It has the housing for the Wi-Fi, but there's no card in there. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to purchase a M.2 basically, or is it PCI? I think it's PCIe 1X actually. Sorry, I think that's what it is. One of those little cards, and you'll need to actually take, if we look at this, you'll take the heatsink off and the back plate off. You'll need to install the card in the housing, screw it down, and then it'll actually have Wi-Fi for you if that's important. So it's not lying. Those ports are there. This stupid website. Like, these are here because that's the housing. There's just no card in it. There you go. 1x M.2 Wi-Fi interface supports PCIe protocol. So it has the interface, but you'll need to install it yourself. Those cards, you can buy them on Amazon or AliExpress, $10 to $20. So you can figure this board really, if you want Wi-Fi on it, is probably more like $120 board versus like $210. And the 210 board, you know, if you got the ASRock, would definitely be a nicer board. But to me, once again, I'm trying to stick to this is 4060 performance. It was kind of experiment for me too. I wanted to try this board out, just curious how cheap it was. But I'm trying to keep it as affordable as possible, knowing that ultimately this is going to be a 4060 build. The other thing I had already laying around, so this is actually incorrect. I did the DDR5 6000 CL28, and I paid about $110 for it. It might have been $120, but that's about where it's at. Let's make sure we get the right one in here. So speed, and it's just the 32 gigs. I knew that would be everything I could ever want and more. Because once again, it's going to be on the TV. I'm not going to do a ton of multitasking on it, anything like that. Oh, it looks like it's sold out. Well, 120. I'd have to make sure that that's going to clear the case. I think it would, but You could also just you could save a little money for like 80 bucks. You can get CL30. I don't know why. I just always try to get a little bit of a nicer memory because I always end up trying to overclock it and things like that. I think I ended up getting the G Skill kit I had in there at the 6200 CL28, and I was pretty happy with that. For storage, I always do at least a 2 terabyte minimum. There's a couple times I've done like really cheap builds and I do the 1 terabyte, and I always find it frustrating. It always fills up too quick because I want to have a couple of games I can benchmark or whatever, and it's like now I'm uninstalling, reinstalling. So I always do the 2 terabyte, and the Silicon Power UD90 is like my go-to, but that's nothing really special. So we'll move on. Next up, so I was so excited. Gigabyte came out with the 4060 low profile, like right at the end of the 4000 series life cycle, and they just kind of dropped it. I think Asus had one too, but the Gigabyte was a little cheaper, which makes sense. They always are. And they did it right at the end, and they were like, hey, we got this 4060 low profile. It's breathing new life into the small form factor scene. And then like immediately the 5000 series came out. So I don't know if it was just like they had a couple extra silicone left over, they can make these cards or whatever, but I bought mine I think like in January, and the price has already gone through the roof, so there's no reason to get the 4060 at this point. They already came out, and it looks exactly the same, but they got the 5060, which is awesome because I think the 5060 from most things I'm showing is about like 15% faster or so. So you're getting even better performance, and that's about the price I paid. I think I paid $330 for mine. But this is awesome. And the amount of power in this low profile card compared to what you could have done previously, which your options were like the 6400 XT or like the 1030, like the GTX 1030, those were absolute meme cards. And now we're able to get some serious horsepower in these things relative to the size. I mean, keep in mind, this is a 4.5 liter case, which brings us to the star of the show, the Jonsbo NV-10. The one thing I will say is, once again, this case is not available as far as I've seen on like Amazon. I think at one point it was on Newegg. I don't think it's on there anymore. You can get it on AliExpress. It's a little bit expensive. Jonesbo products, I absolutely love them because there's things from China or things on AliExpress that are absolute ripoffs. This is probably one of them. This isn't a ripoff in the sense that it looks like some other manufacturers, but a B650 for so cheap, they're using somebody's design, putting their own covers on it, and they're making it on the cheap. Jonesbo products are very high quality. The metal on this is thick and sturdy. This is small, but you do not have to worry about like, oh, I might accidentally fold it like tinfoil. This thing is rugged. When you pick it up, it is heavier than you might think for how small it is. But I like it, and it's got the nice little wood grain. I don't know if it's real wood or not, but it looks really nice. It doesn't look like cheap. I've had products with really cheap wood inserts. This is not one of them. It's even got like little RGB ring around the power, USB-C on there is its only connectivity on the front. But this is an absolute premium case, and it's something that doesn't have a whole lot of competitors, so I think it's worth every bit of the $120. The only thing that stinks is it's just not widely available in the US, and you're going to have to order it most likely off of somewhere like AliExpress. But I can't say enough good things about this case. It is the absolute star of the show. And then the final thing that always throws me for a loop is like, what am I going to do about the power situation? So you're going to need to use a flex ATX, which that's also one of the unique things about this build is many times when you go down, like you can get all the way down to like the 2-liter case range, and that's going to be an APU and an external power supply. It's going to use like a laptop charger basically. And then you can get something into like the mini ITX builds that will fit full-size video cards and just like the small form factor, ATX power supplies. This case is going to require that you use a flex ATX. Now, I just once again did a filler because PC part picker doesn't have a lot of these more obscure parts, but this is a Flex ATX case. This is Silverstone. This is a $200 power supply. Because it's a little bit non-standard, these get expensive quick. So this is where I'll probably get some people being like, I can't believe you trust your system to this. But ultimately what I did is I tried out using an Apevia, or however you say their name. I'll be the first to admit I don't trust this brand. I would not be building a high power system with one of these, but at $50 versus $200, and they promised me it has all the protections, and then it's got, you know, everything I need. It's got my PCIe connectors and everything. I decided to really roll the dice on this thing, and $50 was too good of a deal to pass up. And I put this computer together. I'm behind on some of my footage. I put this computer together, I think, in like January or February. So it's been a couple months, and I've been enjoying it. And this thing's been working fine. So I don't want you guys to say like, oh, you know, Johnny Rage says the Apevia is the best brand ever, and you should put it in all your computers. But I made the gamble, and it's been working out for me. And at $50 versus 200, trying to keep the cost down here. And I know, you shouldn't be skimping on your power supply, but yeah, it is what it is. That's what I'm using, and it's been working pretty good. And if you look at it, the other thing is I am like well below. So, you know, it's like peak is 500. This is estimating with my parts. I'm using like sub 300, which makes sense. It's a 9600 and a 4060. So that's what I did, and I put it all together. If you look at the total price here with the parts that I used, about $1,032. So if you were going to build the 9600 and a 4060 or 5060 in just a regular case, I would hope you'd get it closer to like $700 or $800. So you do pay a little bit of a premium here, and that's with me skimping on, you know, a couple of the parts, buying some, you know, AliExpress stuff, you know, doing that sort of thing, going with the cheaper cooler, having to modify it. There's not a whole lot more that I could do here to get this in cheaper. I could have gone AM4. No, because I mean, no, I don't think that would have made it any cheaper. And I just, at this point in time in the game, I don't do AM4 builds anymore. I know some people are like, oh, budget, you can do it. It's just ridiculous to me. We're well into AM5, and I'm done with that. So, but that's basically what I did parts setup, and I'm compiling the performance on it right now. Some of my early findings, though, is I want to use this on my 4K TV. And I know people say like 4060 is a 1080p card. It could never do 4K. My earliest findings are that really native gaming is just completely dying, even 1080p. Using the 4060 at 1080p, I don't want to upscale. And my TV that I'm going to hook it up to is only 60 hertz because it's not that great of a TV. So it basically makes frame gen useless because you'd have to go from 30 to 60 FPS, and the base level performance is so bad. So frame gen is kind of out the window. And if you were to just use this as a regular PC and hook it up to a 1080p monitor, I wouldn't want to upscale because I just think it looks bad on 1080p, even with some of the newer stuff. So I'm finding that at 4K, you, especially with the newer models, you can get really aggressive into the uh, upscaler, not use frame gen, and get pretty decent performance that looks good. And the other thing about the upscaling and getting aggressive is when I'm sitting in front of my PC and I've got my 4K monitor, you know, 24 inches from my face or whatever, I don't, you notice all the little artifacts, you notice all the little things. When this thing's hooked up to my TV in my living room and I'm sitting like 10 feet away from it, you don't nearly notice if there is like a little artifact or something. So that's what I think is kind of funny is the consoles are all AMD based, which I'm sure they get a good deal on the parts is why. But I feel like some of this NVIDIA technology, like, hey, use performance or ultra performance upscaling, use, frame gen, 4 times frame gen. I feel all that looks great when you're like 10 feet away from it. So I feel like it's really optimized for the console, but none of the consoles run NVIDIA. But all my games are on Steam, which works out for me. And I build this little box. And I'm finding that with like medium settings, DLSS performance, and ray tracing off or as low as possible in games that require it, this thing's actually been a great console replacement. And I already have like really, really hardcore gaming rigs. Not everything has to be a 9800 X3D and a 5090. This is a great little thing. And my kid likes to play a little racing sim on it. And that's really what I built it for. But of course, I got to test it out and see all the other stuff. So I'm going to get some video footage put together of the performance on it, and I'll get that uploaded. It's kind of dated now because the 5060 is already out, but I'm still gonna put it out there just so I have something backing up my build, showing it running in all of its might. So if you like the content, let me know. I always like sharing different builds that I'm working on and all the stuff I do for fun. And then I'll have links. They will be promotional links, so or I'm sorry, affiliate links, so they will benefit the channel. So if you do use them, that'll help me out if you're interested in building anything like this. But I really appreciate the support on that. And drop a like and subscribe, and good luck building.